The elevator doors opened, and the entire rooftop went quiet. Not the polite kind of quiet that happens when someone important walks in, the kind that falls like glass, sudden, sharp, impossible to ignore. Clara stepped out first. Her dress was deep emerald, clean lines, no embellishment, nothing reaching for attention, yet impossible to ignore. She didn't need it to. She moved across that rooftop the way someone moves when they've already decided the outcome of every conversation they'll have tonight. And beside her, a man. Tall, Korean, unhurried, his suit darker than the night sky behind him, eyes that scanned the room once and understood everything without asking a single question. Dominic saw them from across the rooftop. His champagne glass stopped halfway to his mouth. His new wife, Priya, felt his arms stiffen. She followed his gaze. "Who is that?" she asked softly. He didn't answer. Because 4 years ago, he made sure no one would ever have to answer that question again. He made sure Clara's name disappeared so completely that even people who were there wouldn't remember exactly what she did or how much she mattered. And yet here she was, standing in the middle of everything he'd built on her back. Let's go back to the beginning, because that's where the truth lives. 7 years ago, Dominic Carter was a man with a vision and a laptop, and almost nothing else. He had the energy of someone who believed deeply in himself, which is a different thing from having the skill to match it. He could sell a dream before he'd written a single line of code. He could walk into a room full of investors and make them feel like they were already late. But when he walked out of those rooms, it was Clara who stayed up until 3 in the morning, making sure the dream was actually buildable. They met at a startup accelerator in Atlanta. She was already the smartest person in every room she entered. She just didn't announce it. Her background was computational systems and machine learning, at a time when most people were still explaining to investors what machine learning was. She had a mind that didn't just solve problems, it anticipated them. Dominic saw that immediately. What Clara saw in him took longer to understand. He was magnetic, committed, or so it seemed. And when he looked at her across that early conference table and said, "I think you're the piece I've been missing," she believed him. They became partners. Then more than partners. For 3 years, she built the core architecture of what would become Novatech, a predictive analytics platform so advanced that even now, with all the money and all the engineers Dominic had hired since, no one fully understood how the original engine worked. Because the original engine wasn't built by a team, it was built by one woman who thought in dimensions most engineers hadn't discovered yet. Clara didn't just write code. She wrote the logic that made the system feel almost intuitive, the kind of product that users describe as reading their minds. Every major investor who came through their doors in those early years left with the same sentence. Whatever is under the hood of this thing is extraordinary. What was under the hood was Clara. Then success arrived. And with it, something shifted in Dominic that Clara didn't see coming fast enough. It started with small things. A meeting she wasn't invited to. A press quote that credited the founding team without mentioning her specifically. A legal document restructuring equity that appeared in her email with a request for her signature by end of day, buried in 40 pages of standard boilerplate. She flagged it. He dismissed it. "It's just administrative. You know what you mean to this." But she started paying closer attention. 6 months later, she found it, not by accident, by the same systematic thinking that built the platform in the first place. A full restructuring of IP ownership, quietly executed, her name removed from every foundational document, reclassified as a consulting contributor to a product she had architected from scratch. She sat with that information for 3 days. Then she did something Dominic never anticipated, because he'd already stopped thinking of her as someone capable of thinking ahead of him. Deep inside the system's core architecture, in a layer so embedded that no engineer would find it without knowing exactly what to look for, Clara placed a clause, a dormant trigger. If intellectual theft was ever legally established against the platform's founding IP, ownership would automatically revert to the original verified creator. She tied it to a cryptographic signature only she held. Then she signed the documents he'd sent her. And 2 months after that, when Dominic served her with divorce papers alongside a non-disclosure agreement thicker than a novel, she signed those too. She left. He told the world a different story. I built this from nothing. He said it in interviews, in keynotes, in that documentary that ran on a major streaming platform and made him look like a modern genius forged purely by determination and sacrifice. The story of Novatech became the story of Dominic Carter, self-made, visionary, relentless. Clara's name existed nowhere in that story, not in the press, not in the filings, not in the mythology he'd constructed so carefully around himself. She had been erased. In Seoul, Ji-hoon Park had a reputation that preceded every meeting he took. He didn't invest in companies, he invested in truth. That was how his partners described him, half joking, until they saw him work and realized it wasn't a joke at all. Before any deal, Ji-hoon commissioned technical audits so thorough that founders sometimes said it felt like being turned inside out. He wasn't looking for risk. He was looking for the thing underneath the risk, the part people had decided to hide. Novatech landed on his desk through a mutual contact in Q3 of the previous year. A potential global licensing deal, 9 figures, the kind of thing that makes headlines. On the surface, everything checked out. Dominic was polished. The pitch deck was immaculate. The platform's performance numbers were extraordinary. But Ji-hoon had learned long ago that extraordinary results almost always have a source that the presenter is either proud of or ashamed of. He ordered the full audit. His technical team worked for 6 weeks. They went into version histories that hadn't been accessed in years. They traced commit logs, architectural decisions, early internal documentation. And 3 weeks in, one of his lead engineers sent him a message at 11 at night that said simply, "You need to see this." The original codebase had a signature, not an official one, something subtler, a stylistic fingerprint in the way certain recursive functions were structured, a logic pattern that appeared in the earliest builds and then, after a specific date, never appeared again. Like the person who wrote it had simply stopped existing. There was a name in those early files, Clara Mensah, listed as technical co-founder in internal documents dated from the first 18 months of the company. Then, after a restructuring that appeared to have no corresponding public record, the name was gone. Every external-facing document from that point forward described Dominic as the sole founder. Ji-hoon read the audit report twice. Then he made one call. Not to his legal team, not to his partners, to a private investigator he trusted. "Find her," he said. "Don't contact her, just find her." It took 11 days. She was in Georgia, not hiding, not struggling, building. Clara had spent the 18 months since her departure doing what she'd always done, working. She had consulting clients on 3 continents. She was developing her own platform, smaller than Novatech, but built entirely on her own terms, in her own name. She'd stopped following news about Dominic the way you stop checking a scar once it's healed, not because it didn't matter, but because you've already made peace with what it cost you. She was in her apartment on a Tuesday afternoon when her phone rang. Unknown caller. She almost didn't pick up. "Ms. Mensah." The voice was calm, direct, not the kind of person who started with pleasantries. "My name is Ji-hoon Park. I think you already know why I'm calling." Silence. She looked out her window at the quiet street below. A pickup truck rolled past. A woman walked by with a tote bag slung over her shoulder, moving with easy, unhurried grace. "I might," she said carefully. "I've seen the code," he said. "All of it, including the part he didn't know you left inside." Her hand tightened slightly around the phone. "What do you want?" she asked. "Not what you think," Ji-hoon said. "I'm not calling to offer you a settlement. I'm not calling to build leverage. I have a full technical audit, a legal team, and enough documentation to dismantle the narrative he spent 4 years constructing. A pause. I'm calling because I wanted to ask you one question first. Ask it. Did you know you could have taken it back when you left? A long silence. Yes, she said quietly. Why didn't you? She thought about it for a moment, not because she didn't know the answer, but because she wanted to give him the real one. Because destroying something isn't the same as reclaiming it, she said. I wasn't ready to reclaim it. I am now. On his end of the call, in a glass office 42 floors above Seoul, Ji-hoon Park allowed himself something he rarely permitted in business. A smile. He's hosting a birthday party in 3 weeks, he said. His entire investor network will be there. Every journalist who covered that documentary. Every person who believed the story he told. I know, Clara said. Come with me. She didn't answer immediately. She walked to her window and stood there, looking at the street, the city, the ordinary afternoon unfolding outside, like nothing in her life was about to tilt on its axis. He'll have his wife there, she said, not a question. Yes, and his board, his new investors, everyone who matters to him. Yes. Another pause. You said truth needs an audience, she said slowly, as if testing the weight of it. It does, Ji-hoon said. She looked down at her hand, the thin bracelet on her wrist, the only thing she'd kept from before. A reminder she wore not out of sentiment, but out of something harder to name. The part of herself that refused to shrink. 3 weeks, she said. 3 weeks. She hung up. The rooftop party was exactly what Dominic had designed it to be. Gold everything, glass and light, and that particular hum of money gathered in one place, congratulating itself. 200 guests, every one of them carefully curated. Investors, journalists, board members, the kind of people whose presence makes other people pull out their phones to document that they were also present. Dominic had been working the room for 40 minutes when the elevator opened. The silence that followed was the kind you couldn't manufacture. He recovered fast. He was good at that. Years of pitching had trained his face into a reliable mask. He crossed the rooftop slowly, Priya's hand in his, and stopped 6 feet from where Clara and Ji-hoon stood. Clara, his voice was measured. I didn't expect... Of course you didn't, Ji-hoon said. Not loud, not hostile, just certain, the way someone speaks when they're not performing for the room. They're addressing the room. He turned once to a member of his team near the AV setup. The music died. A screen at the far end of the rooftop lit up. The guests turned. Some confused, some curious, some already recording. What appeared on the screen wasn't dramatic. That was what made it devastating. No accusations in bold text. No angry voiceover. Just documents. Code timestamps from the original Novatech builds, dated and verified, with Clara's cryptographic signature embedded in the architecture. Development logs. Early internal communications where Dominic himself referred to Clara as the technical brain behind the whole system. Photographs of whiteboard sessions, architectural diagrams in her handwriting. And finally, the legal restructuring documents. The ones where her classification was quietly changed, her equity dissolved, her name removed from the founding records. 7 minutes of evidence, assembled with the kind of precision that didn't need commentary. When it ended, Ji-hoon spoke. You didn't build this company, he said, looking at Dominic directly. You removed the person who did, and then you told her story as if it was yours. The room didn't erupt. It fractured quietly. Whispers moved through it like water finding cracks. 3 board members were already on their phones. A journalist near the back had stopped recording the screen and turned her camera toward Dominic's face instead. Priya let go of his arm. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. She simply lowered her hand. But in the silence of that rooftop, it was the loudest thing that happened. Dominic opened his mouth, closed it. For the first time in a decade, The words didn't come. Because there was nothing to pitch this time. No vision to sell. No story polished smooth enough to replace the one currently dissolving in front of 200 witnesses. Clara watched him. Not with satisfaction, not with anger. Something quieter. The expression of someone who carried a weight for a long time and has just set it down for good. Ji-hoon stepped beside her. Not in front of her, beside. He didn't look at the crowd, he looked at her. And he kissed her. Slow and deliberate, not a performance, not a statement for the room. The kind of thing that happens between two people when everything external has finally gone quiet enough for them to simply be present with each other. When they pulled apart, Clara's eyes stayed on his for a moment before she turned back to the city spreading wide and bright beyond the rooftop railing. Later, much later, when the guests were gone and the sirens had faded and the rooftop held only the two of them, and the kind of silence that comes after something true has been said in a room full of people who needed to hear it, Clara stood at the railing. She wasn't thinking about Dominic. She was thinking about the years, the early mornings, the whiteboards, the version of herself who built something extraordinary and then watched someone else frame it and hang it on their wall. She heard Ji-hoon's footsteps before he spoke. He stopped beside her, not touching, just present. "I've met a lot of powerful people," he said quietly. She exhaled slowly, not heavy, just real. "Most of them need to be seen," he continued. "You rebuilt without anyone watching." She turned her head slightly toward him. "I didn't rebuild for them," she said. "I rebuilt so no one could take it from me again." He nodded, not a response, more like recognition, the quiet acknowledgement of someone who understood the difference between rebuilding for applause and rebuilding for ground. He reached into his jacket and offered her a small card. Simple, no logo, just a name, a number, and space. "I'm starting something new," he said. "Not a company you'd be brought into, not a project where your name ends up in a footnote." He looked at her steadily. "Something built with you from the first day." She held the card, looked at it, looked at him. And for the first time that night, maybe for the first time in a long time, the small, almost invisible smile that crossed her face was entirely for herself. She closed the distance between them. This time, she kissed him. No audience, no statement, no story to perform for anyone watching. Just truth, exchanged between two people standing above a city that had once swallowed her name whole. When they pulled back, their foreheads nearly touched. The city lights went on forever ahead of them, not something to conquer, something to build. He built an empire on what he stole. She built a future on what he couldn't take. If this story stayed with you, like and subscribe. More stories where truth always finds its way back.